Hi everybody and welcome to Deep in the Bush. Joining me today is Clova Mabin from the Shark Education Centre, which is funded by Save Our Seas Foundation. I don't know a huge amount about that, which is shameful of me. I used to live just near enough to around the corner from it. So Clova, tell us a little bit about the Shark Education Centre and what it is that you do there.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So we have been open since 2008, since May 2008, but I've only been with the organisation for the last couple of years. But predominantly, in normal circumstances, we run school group tours. So schools come to visit us. So we're open during the week, and schools come to visit us in the mornings, and then we're open to the public for visits in the afternoon. Obviously, everything looks a bit different at the moment with COVID, so not so many school groups. And we're a bit more free or a bit more open with our times for members of the public visiting, but with much smaller group sizes than before.
Okay, so why is it important that school-age kids learn about sharks? What do they need to know?
Well, that's quite a big question to start off with. So we don't focus just on sharks. I should have said that. We give an overview on the marine environment, marine ecosystem, with kind of a focus on sharks. So we're actually situated right in False Bay, which is a beautiful big bay in Cape Town, South Africa, and it's we have an amazing rocky shore ecosystem right outside our front door. So we tend to use that kind of as a hook to get kids excited about the marine ecosystem and talk to them about the animals that they can find on the rocky shores and plants. And then also talk about some of the animals that they don't see when they visit the rocky shore with us, but also that they can see further out in the deeper ocean, animals like sharks and rays, of course. But yeah, those ecosystems, unfortunately, like all of our ecosystems on this planet, are hugely threatened at the moment. And so we're kind of hoping to develop some passion, for them to develop some passion and some awe of these animals and plants and ecosystems, so that they will be more excited about conservation and about protecting them.
Yeah, absolutely. And what question do you get asked most often? I mean, when kids come in, what is the one thing that every single group, somebody in the class is going to ask you?
Yeah, we get some funny ones. That's the thing with kids. They ask interesting questions. Most kids, of course, ask about how dangerous sharks are. Most kids think about sharks as being the...
Surely most grown-ups actually ask that one too.
Well, I think maybe they think it, but maybe they don't want to ask. I think they ask about how dangerous they are, whether they're likely to be eaten by a shark. It's normally the phrase, rather than bitten by a shark, or whether they're lucky enough to have a shark encounter. That's probably the most asked question that we get.
What question do you wish they would ask instead?
What can we do? What can we do to help save sharks?
Okay, so if they did ask, what would you say?
Oh gosh, there's so many ways you can go about that. So in terms of the threats that sharks and rays and the marine ecosystem are facing today, kind of comes in multiple factors. So there's things, and most of it's human driven. So there's things like climate change and the effects that that's having on the oceans. So things like the oxygen levels are dropping in the oceans, they're becoming more acidic, and those are having knock-on effects on the animals that live there in terms of changing ranges. So they may be moving further afield. They're also, I read an interesting paper the other day about, because shark skins are made out of, it's a tooth-like substance called denticles. So if you think about teeth in an acid environment, like Coke. So actually there's, if you put drinking a lot of Coke, it can have a similar effect on shark skin as the oceans are becoming more acidic. So there was actually a study looking at some of our local shark species just down the South African coastline, and they found that the denticles were changing as a result of that acidic environment.
So they're changing. Then it's not that they're evolving; they're actually being damaged by the higher acidity.
Well, I don't think it's in the time frame to kind of look at. Yeah, I think it's unfortunately due to it's over a shorter time frame, and it's probably most likely due to that.
Wow, so yeah, it's actually damaging there.
Yeah,
because
so that's
famously tough. It's famously tough. I mean, I think when there are incidents with sharks, a lot of the injuries people actually get is from the skin brushing them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very abrasive. It's very abrasive. So actually, one way it's not abrasive. I don't know if you know that. So one way it's actually really smooth, and then the reverse is almost like sandpaper. So we've got a piece of shark skin that we like to show the kids. They love to, and they always say it just feels like sandpaper. So yeah, it's amazing.
My first exposure to it was in Japan, and in ancient times, a proper samurai sword had shark skin for the grip, because it stopped your hands from sliding down. They could move up but not down. So they could move up into the guard but not down to the bottom and slide off the end. And so that's specifically shark skin was used for that, for the ancient.
They must have had thick gloves as well.
I don't know. It's not what's used anymore. Surprisingly, they've actually decided that it's not sustainable. But I was actually got to hold a very old samurai sword at one point in Japan when I went to school there, and it was quite amazing. It was hundreds of years old, and you could still feel the grip on it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, quite remarkable. Okay, so sorry, I cut you off there, but I did warn you. There's going to be a lot of tangents.
That's all. It's just like dealing with children. It's fine.
Yeah. I've never quite grown up, and I really.
Who would want to?
So, sorry, carry on.
No, so climate change in multiple factors, and things like overfishing. So fishing is a big threat to sharks. Yeah, and so it's about, and also so the things that people often think about, and also the things that are more easily remedied at the home level, and often are kind of given as solutions to kids because it's something that they feel is a manageable action. Things like pollution. So there's the plastic pollution, which kind of becomes the main thing that people focus on. But then there's also, there's pollution from agriculture, there's pollution from lots of different sources, from industry. Overall, there's a way that you can play a role in stopping these, in reducing these threats. But it's kind of, that's harder for a child to grasp often.
So, if just simply by them picking up litter around their school, they could actually help save sharks. It seems quite disconnected, yet it does make sense if those are going to wash into the gutters, flow into the rivers and out into the ocean.
Yeah, sure.
The connection to here as well.
Yeah, so we do talk about that, about the links between the home environment and the waterways, and how everything washes down the stormwater drains into the, and in some places in the world, into the sewage systems, and sometimes there can be very little management of those sewage systems. So lots of things wash into the ocean from a home level that can be reduced.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine. Does a lot of tour guiding around Cape Town. Once saying to me, he said, Cape Town's got some of the least litter of any city in the world. And I thought, really? He said, yeah, the wind just blows it straight out into the ocean. Okay, yeah. So it's one of those things where it sounds a positive is actually very negative. And I can imagine that. And of course, when you think Cape Town and sharks, most people jump to the famous great whites and the breaching great whites near Cape Town. How many species of shark are there, give or take a few, in and around False Bay where you are?
So I think, we have a kind of thing that we've launched recently that was the most common shark species, and that was based on scientific records using baited underwater vessels that recorded the most common passes by shark species, and there was about 13 shark species, but we probably on a wider scale is probably about 20, but there's also sightings of different things over time by fishermen. You get the odd whale shark coming to Cape Town, You get the odd basking shark, which are not really kind of common species, but they do pass through our waters every now and again.
That must give those fishermen quite a fright. Basking sharks are huge. I mean, a whale shark is so obviously not a great white, but a basking shark, you just think that's huge.
Basking sharks are around 10 meters, so it's kind of, and it's also similar. Like, I mean, whale sharks have kind of the spotty skin, so it's quite distinctive. But a basking shark has kind of more of the grey and white tones that you see in a white shark. So yeah, I'm sure they could be. There's a few fishermen that have got a bit of a fright from those.
Yeah. And I mean, these sharks as well. I mean, we've just mentioned the basking and the whale shark, the great white. I think that is the 3 largest shark species in the world, isn't it? Or was the Greenland shark edge in there as well?
There's the megamouth as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
and
those some of the bigger ones.
The top species are the megamouth, the basking, and the whale shark, and those are all actually filter feeders. So it's quite amazing. People think the biggest sharks will be the scariest, but they just eat plankton and krill.
If you think about it like dogs, Great Danes are slobbering love balls. They're adorable. Irish wolfhound's pretty inoffensive as well. But imagine if a Chihuahua was the size of a Labrador. That'd be a bad But you've obviously got a lot of smaller sharks there. There was a documentary that I believe is just being shortlisted for the Oscars, My Octopus Teacher, that was filmed in and around your neck of the kelp, let's call it that. And that actually obviously highlighted things like the pajama sharks. And I think, again, people in their head as sharks, we've all been conditioned by movies like Jaws and even things like Shark Week, which were all about sharks that might eat people. Very sensationalist. There are so many sharks that eat nothing but crabs or octopus. And some of them are really pretty markings. I mean, the pajama shark is a beautiful name for it. Of those sharks you mentioned, what kind of size are we talking of the 12 or so species you recorded?
So actually, the majority of sharks worldwide are around 1 meter in length.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they're much smaller than people think. So yeah, those pajama sharks, of the 13 shark species, it's quite a lot of cat sharks, and then the shy sharks. I think there's like six in total of the 13, and those are all around 1 meter in length. Meter in length or under, so between 60 and 100 centimeters.
And how many surfers do they consume a year?
No, none.
Just the tiny ones.
Yeah.
They're in those kelp forests. Now, do any of these migrate, or do these sharks stay put?
Of the smaller, the shy sharks and the cat sharks? As far as I know, that's a good question. As far as I know, they don't migrate much. I think they've got quite local home ranges, small home ranges. So yeah, I don't think they go too far. And they're the ones that lay the little egg cases that you often see washing up on the beach. The little mermaid, they call them mermaids' purses. And they lay those in the kelp forests. They have little tendrils that kind of hook onto the kelp or onto rocks. And so they don't. It's not a broadcast spawner or anything, so that it doesn't spread out further than the home range.
Broadcast spawner. That's a great term. I've never actually heard that. So I'm guessing that's where they just put the eggs into a current. Or something.
So a lot of fish are kind of more broadcast spawners or other inverts.
Is it inappropriate that if I say I've got a few friends like that? I won't name them, but yes, a couple of guys I know, broadcast spawners. I'm definitely using it in the future. So this is not negative body language. It just, before this I was mentioning this is the coldest day in the UK in 10 years. I'm inside, the heater's on, I'm bloody freezing. It's not very sustainable, but it does
our hottest day.
I know, but it does make me think. Cold temperatures make me think of that Cape water. I mean, you are on the Indian Ocean side, and for people that don't know, Cape Town is often described, or Cape Point is where two oceans meet. the Atlantic and the cold Atlantic Ocean and the warmer Indian Ocean. But of course, there is no true meeting point, is there?
No, they say it's actually about a 200 meters meeting point. So obviously that depends on the current, on the winds, on lots of things. But yeah, it's between Cape Point and the Cape of Agulhas. I almost forgot the name of it, Cape Agulhas. So yeah, it's around 200 kilometers down the coast. So it's not quite a distinct meeting point. Sometimes you can actually see the our different currents coming together, and there is like different colors. You can see it very clearly in some pictures. But yeah, most of the time it's not so obvious.
It is. I mean, it is such a beautiful part of the world where there are certain places you can be on a peak, and you are guaranteed you are looking at two different oceans at the same time, which is really, really wonderful. And having said that, as someone that grew up in warmer waters, even on the Indian Ocean side, to me, it's bloody cold and quite hostile. And yet that kelp forest, it's the Serengeti of the ocean, isn't it? There's just so much life in there, perhaps because of the cold and the upwelling. And what are the threats to that kelp forest? Or perhaps we'd better start by describing what that kelp forest is. And you'll be better placed to do that than me.
Yeah, so the kelp forest is kind of like the forest of the ocean, and similar to the forests that we get on land. So it's actually, I don't know if you know that the majority of oxygen on our planet comes from the sea. So all the plants or algae in the sea makes up to between 70 and 80% of the oxygen that we have on this planet. And so actually really important to protect our various algal species. So the kelp is amazing. So we've got several species in the Cape, but we have these big sea bamboos, which are, I don't even know the maximum length, but probably around, I don't know, 30 plus meters. So the stalk of the tree, it's kind of got a big, like a hand that grips onto the rock. It's called a holdfast. And then that goes all the way up the trunk, and then there's the leaves at the top, which you see bobbing on the top of the sea surface.
It does look.
Yeah, so those.
It can trick you. I mean, all that kelp. I mean, I lived in Cape Town for almost a decade. I think seal, no kelp. Seal, no kelp. Seal, not a seal. It's kelp. And then, of course, you start second guessing yourself until the kelp starts swimming. But
the same color as the seal, the dark brown. So it is deceiving.
Is the kelp forest off the Cape Peninsula or the southern Cape of South Africa? Is that the same as a kelp forest you might get anywhere else in the world, or is it?
There's some similarities. So it's not. I don't think it's exactly the same species, but I stand to be corrected. But there are similarities between the west coast of. So South Africa and Namibian, those species, you see kelp forest all the way up into Namibia. And there are similarities on the west coast of South America as well. So Chile, and you just see some species, a lot of similarities between those species as well.
Yeah, similarly, yeah. And also, I mean, they do have otters in their kelp forest there as well. There's actually a Chilean otter that you get nowhere else in the world. And of course, you have the Cape otter. Wonderful animal. But something I'm sure you've been asked by the kids, and you've now got a definitive answer for. There's a bit of a change of tack from the science of the kelp forest is who wins in a fight between an orca and a great white shark? And you've had that answered. What's happened there?
Okay, so you're referring to when the sharks disappeared. So basically, I think it's probably up from about 2000, and so we've got a great organisation here called the Shark Spotters, all along the coast of False Bay, who keep track of shark spottings to encourage water safety. So they have a whole alert system to alert beach goers when there are sharks in the water. So they've kept really great records of shark presence in the bay, and we know that there were white sharks in the bay basically consistently up until 2018, I think, around 200, say, sightings in a year. And that then dropped to, I don't know, a handful in 2000. So that must have been 2017. So in 2018, it dropped to a handful. And then 2019, there were no white sharks spotted at all.
Zero.
Zero.
Wow.
And then in January 2020, I think there was one white shark spotted. Yeah. And then, of course, COVID happened, so everything closed down. So we're not quite sure the final numbers for this year. But yeah, so basically the white sharks, it was a very healthy population of white sharks in the bay previously, and Cape Town became kind of known for its white shark population. But they all seemed to disappear. And it seemed to coincide with the appearance of the killer whale, the orca. But yeah, it is a little bit out for discussion at the moment. There are kind of various theories that were being played around that it could be due to overfishing of the prey species that the juvenile white sharks feed on. It could be due to changes in False Bay. I don't know, lots of different changes, climate change, runoff from river systems. But so also alongside that, also several carcasses of white sharks were washed up, which seemed to have almost like surgeon-like incisions made into them, removing the liver from the animal, which is very nutrient rich, and orcas are known to do that, to predate on other animals like that. So yeah, there were a few signs that were pointing towards the orcas, and it looks like that will be the biggest factor. But because of COVID and because of the research that they planned for this year, unfortunately the answer is not quite set in stone yet. But it looks like that it does play a role. Sorry, so that's a bit of a isn't it?
No, I mean, one of the things I love about science is a lot of the time the answer is, yeah, we don't know. We're investigating this. Could be a dead end, and we'll try to think of some other theory and attempt to prove or disprove it. But in terms of great white sharks, I actually spent some time with whale sharks just recently in Tanzania about a month ago, and the distribution is apparently largely to avoid orcas and great whites. So they're in the warmer waters because orcas with their blubber layers don't cope well in warm waters. But one of their great defenses against the orcas, if they do encounter them, is just to go deep, to go really, really deep, because of course the orca has to come up and breathe and they don't. Is there a chance that great whites have gone deep, or do you think they have migrated? Are they going and picking up an Australian accent, or are they off California somewhere with all the surfer dudes?
So white sharks, obviously because of the attention that they get, have been very well studied over the last few decades in South Africa. So we do know a lot about individual sharks, and white sharks you can actually identify based on their fins, the shape, the pattern of their fins. So they use it like a fingerprint to identify individuals.
Are you proud of that one?
No, I didn't make that. That's what they call it. So they use them, so they can identify individual sharks. So they know that there are various types of populations. So there are resident sharks in the area, and there are also transient sharks, which do larger migrations. So there was one shark actually, Nicole, who became quite famous a few years ago because she was named after Nicole Kidman. She swam all the way to Australia and back, and we know that because she had a tag on her, and also as a result of that distance data, we also got quite a lot of depth data from her. So I think the deepest that she went was about 1,000 meters.
Wow.
So white sharks are obviously very capable of diving deep, so that could be what's happening, but also because we've got that identification database, we know that a lot of those sharks have actually moved east. So the numbers in kind of the Mossel Bay, Plettenberg Bay area in South Africa, those numbers have increased, and they're seeing some of those sharks coming through as well.
And they are known sharks, so they can say, right, they're shifting their activities over to there. And again, it could be climate change, or it could be the orcas have driven them out. We just don't know at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because actually there's a lot more pressure on demersal shark from demersal shark fisheries in that kind of eastern area, but they still seem to be moving that way. So I don't know whether the pressure from the orcas or from other factors in this area are greater, that they're pushing in that direction, or that the prey species are moving that way, so that they are also following the prey species. It could be, yeah, again, multiple factors.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose over there as well, they'd catch everything that's in and around the sardine run, at least for a week or two of the year. And for people who don't know, everybody knows of the wildebeest migration in the Masai Mara Serengeti. That is by far Africa's greatest, largest migration. Every year there is a sardine run, as it's called, starting on the east coast, coming round to the south of South Africa, and following this mass and billions, perhaps trillions of sardines. I don't know the sheer numbers of it. Dolphins, whales, sharks, birds, of course, bombing in from above. It is the most chaotic scenes you can imagine. It's not quite as predictable as the wildebeest migration, but it's, I think, probably the greatest spectacle that Africa has to offer in terms of wildlife. So if the great whites are sitting at the tail end of that, at the colder end, to pick off not necessarily the sardines, but the things that eat the sardines, that would certainly be good for them but as I said, a week or two of the year. I don't know how often. I know the makos would come in for that, but I'm not sure about the great whites.
Yeah, I think they have been spotted, but not not as regularly as other species.
So we've got a mystery on our hands as to why they've moved and how many are dead. You mentioned with them the carcasses on the beach, a surgical incision. Somebody I know has theorized that it's actually poaching, being sold. I've never heard anybody else express that. Is there any credence to that?
To be honest, I haven't heard that. But yeah, poaching in this country is a big problem. So I wouldn't rule it out. I don't know. I'm not sure. I know that 5 carcasses of white sharks washed up. I think it was in Hansby, all at the same time. I don't know I don't know why they put it down to the orcas exactly, whether they found a tooth or whether they'd seen it in another prey species, the same exact carving kind of. I'm not entirely sure on that, but yeah, it could. I hope not, but who knows with poaching.
I mean, it's very rarely observed. I have actually seen footage from Northern California. There's those amazing rock formations somewhere, I think, a bit north of Monterey. It's got the Devil's Teeth or something like that. I don't know if you've heard of those islands. And it was some people on a whale watching tour got incredibly lucky and actually saw an orca kill a great white. And there's some shaky footage of it. Definitely doesn't eat it. You see the shark, but doesn't eat it. Whether he takes out the liver or not, I'm not, couldn't pick out from the video. But I mean, I do know with terrestrial animals, something like a cheetah will typically pull out those richest of organs first of all, before moving on to the meat as such, because of how rich they are. And they're worried, of course, about hyenas or leopards, lions coming to steal it from them. I don't think the great white's so worried. So the orca's so worried about scavengers, but perhaps that's just a good enough meal. And the rest of the great white isn't that good eating. Don't know.
Yeah, it's also the time spent, the resources spent, the energy spent in that kind of chase. It's not just about the reward, and it's the time that the animals got to put into it, efforts as well. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, as you say, there's not really many predators of an orca.
Are there what are there any? I mean, us or?
Yeah, I would say probably whaling was probably, humans is probably the biggest threat to orcas.
Yeah, SeaWorld probably the biggest threat to orcas. You're being very very circumspect on that one.
Okay. The phrase.
All right, so if I was to come into the shark education center, one of the things I would want to know is, are sharks smart?
So it depends how you define smart. How do you define smart?
Is one going to ever beat me at Scrabble?
I think that might be a push. Can you play Scrabble underwater?
I'll give it a go. Am I allowed a tank?
No, the shark doesn't have one. Fair is fair.
I don't know. I mean, has anybody ever done anything? You know, one of the classic intelligence tests, which is skewed in favor of the rat, is the rat in the maze. And it's a little unfair because rats live in an environment like a maze. Of course, they're good at mazes. A koala will flunk at it because they never encounter something like a maze. And potentially they're quite stupid as well. But has anybody ever taken one of the smaller shark species and tested its ability to learn or to solve problems that you're aware of?
Yeah, in terms of learning, there have been some studies done on I think it was the bamboo shark that looked at its ability to recognize shapes. And so then there was like a reward system, and if it recognized, I don't know, a triangle or a square, then it would get a reward. And then I think they tested it over a period of time to see how long they could remember that positive association for it. And it was one shark that was actually, it remembered after 50 weeks, and so almost a year. Still remember that if it tapped the triangle with its snout, then it would get a reward. And I think actually I remember hearing that it was actually the 50-week mark was the end of the experiment. So we don't actually know whether that could have gone on longer. The scientists had enough.
Switching the lights off as they went out and go, "You're still clever." Right. Okay. So I've never heard anything about that, because it was actually, as I was putting some questions together for this, is just, I think sharks are typically portrayed as ancient, brutish. They don't get better because they don't need to. They're already perfect at what they do. But again, thinking of an open water shark, maybe there isn't much strategy involved in its life. But those living in those closed environments, like the pajama sharks, and seeing footage of them hunting those rocky, maze-like environments, that would require some strategy. And it did actually seem, again, in my octopus teacher, like they were actually working in concert at times, which you'd normally, a dolphin wouldn't surprise you in doing that, but I was a little surprised to see sharks doing that. And I was like, oh, maybe there's more to them than they've ever been given credit for. And again, it's the smaller species that are perhaps going to be the more fascinating ones for us to learn from.
Yeah, I mean, they even looked at studies where they could identify like length of lines and find if there was a line that they would identify which line was longest. So it's kind of like there's the curiosity side of things in terms of how smart an animal is and the problem solving, as you say. But I mean, they've also shown that younger individuals, so often, and this obviously helps with knowing a bit of information about the species, so either by identification or just by using their size as a measure. But the younger individuals tend to be more inquisitive. Whereas, so for example, if they encounter a research boat in the water, it often tends to be the younger individuals that come up and kind of mouth the boat or investigate it. Whereas the older sharks are kind of, they've seen it before, so they're not as interested, and they haven't had a positive reward from it. Whereas the younger sharks are kind of still gaining that experience that comes with learning. Yeah, so there are kind of different sides to it.
Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting. Well, I suppose as well, if somebody captured humans and aliens captured us and weren't interested in just probing us, which is apparently what they always want to do, and dropped us in some experiment, and they were giving me a little, well, if they were giving my wife, if they were giving her bits of biltong, now I would be eating those and I'd be working for that reward. She's a vegetarian. She wouldn't work for it, and they'd pass her as stupid. So perhaps it's the experiment that's being correctly rather than the actual animal that's stupid. I know, and this is the interesting thing, is how do we define what makes an animal intelligent? As you said, I can't play Scrabble in the water, but I can, I can play Scrabble on land, which they could never do because that's what I've evolved to do. Can eat a banana underwater. It's really, really difficult, but I was challenged to do it, and I managed to eat a banana underwater.
Sure. That's something I've never or thought about trying. I might have to try it.
It was part of a scuba diving course, and it was to show you how difficult a very mundane task can be without a regular flow of oxygen, and to make you understand how long a very banal task could be. So it was in freshwater, so it wasn't taking all the salt water with it, at the bottom of Lake Malawi, and it did. I mean, do you spend a lot of time on scuba in your work, or are you snorkeling mainly?
Not really. So I'm actually a commercial diver, and I've been a dive master for several years. I did my training in Scotland, which was very cold, even colder than
cold water. Does not bother you?
Well, it does actually. I've become a bit of a not a scaredy cat, but I've just become a bit intolerant since I've moved to South Africa, which is weird. But yeah, no. So I've got a commercial scientific level qualification, so I have spent quite a lot of time underwater, but in my current job, unfortunately, not as much. We've actually got a program that we run at the moment, where we work with a group of kids from under-resourced communities that, and we take them snorkeling once a week, which is really cool. The kids absolutely love it. It's something very different to their normal environment. So yeah, snorkeling we do a bit of, but not so much. I haven't done any recreational fun diving for a long time. But next time I do, I will be eating a banana.
As I said, I wasn't in salt water. I think that would be even less pleasant.
I'm sure that's a thing. Salted bananas somewhere, do they not?
Well, I mean, if across through Central Africa, the banana actually replaces cassava and corn as the staple, but it's the plantain, it's the savory bananas, and yeah, they're absolutely salted. But that's. In that part, it's as rice is to Asia. It's just the base for most meals. Yeah,
I actually used to work in an aquarium, and we had to do like demonstrations for the public. This was in Scotland, and we had sharks in the tank there with us, ragged-tooth sharks, and we had to do like the blowing the bubble thing. So where you take your regulator out and then you blow like smoke rings, but bubble rings, and then yeah, we had a whole lot of acrobatics that we had to do, like somersaults and pyramids and random stuff.
Mermaid? Are you telling me you were a professional mermaid?
No.
Science for me.
It was fun.
If you were diving off South Africa, a little known thing is, the whites have been, the great whites of the Cape region in general have been featured in so many documentaries. Chris and Monique Fellows obviously brought that to a lot of people's attention. And the air jaws, as they called it, terrible bloody name. The breaching sharks going after the seals. But there's another very special shark found off South Africa. It's found around the world as far as I know, but very rarely close to the surface, and that's the cow shark. Is it 6 or 7 gilled? I can never remember.
We've got the 7 gill cow shark. You do also get 6 gill cow sharks, but we've got the 7 gill here in False Bay. Okay,
and that's one of the most ancient sharks, isn't it? I mean, sharks are an old lineage, but I think it was already around about the time the dinosaurs got wiped out.
So it is one of the oldest species that we have today. Oldest in terms of lineages, not oldest in terms of age, because that's the Greenland shark, if you're interested. 400 years, they think. But it is one of the older species. So the 6 and 7 gill, so normally sharks have 5 gills. Most shark species have 5 gills. There are a few species that have 6 or 7 gills, and those lineages were the earliest ones that are still around today. Yeah. So actually, the first shark species where we're seeing first evidence of first sharks in the fossil record is around 420 million years ago. So sharks were actually around before the dinosaurs, and they survived all 5 extinction events since then, and they are still around today, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that really is remarkable. Some of the stats that come out, I think it's so hard as humans to get our head around these timescales. I mean, Homo sapiens we're a blip, 300,000 years or so. That number does seem to change a lot. That's the most current one I've heard. The dinosaurs wiped out 65 million years ago. And I read recently that all these dioramas you see with a stegosaurus here and a T-Rex here are so wildly incorrect, because in terms of timeline, T-Rex lived more closely to us than they did to Stegosaurus. So T-Rexes went out 65 million years ago with the mass die-off died out, and Stegosaurus had already been extinct for 200 million years or so by then. So we're closer to T-Rexes than T-Rexes were to Stegosaurus, which is mind-blowing. And then to think that sharks have been around through all of that, predating this. So the dinosaurs said this, you'll bugger off. Hopefully sharks are watching us and all we're doing to the planet and thinking, yeah, you'll get yours. It's coming.
Yeah.
One of you is going to eat a bat. Just wait.
One of them. You're right. Yeah. Oh dear.
It doesn't appear that that's our meteor, but it's certainly knocking us back. As far as I've heard, though, the cow sharks off the Cape have also vanished. Not necessarily been wiped out, but they're not being seen. I don't know if, again, that's a lack of tourism. So there's nobody going out to look for them. But I did hear that people that have looked for them recently haven't been able to find them. So whether, again, that's environmental, the same factors that drove off the great white, or that the orcas were going for them as well.
So I don't know
anything about it.
Some cow shark carcasses were washing up with similar kind of...
Oh, really?
Some signs of the liver being removed. But also, yeah, I mean, I know that at one point the seven-gill cow sharks and also the bronze whaler shark, which is another common shark species in False Bay, they actually moved. So we've got a big, the reason why we've got one of the reasons we've got quite a lot of the larger predatory sharks in False Bay is that we've got a seal island, so a seal colony in the middle of the bay, the Cape Fur seal. And so actually with the white sharks not really being around in the same numbers, the bronze whalers and the seven-gill sharks were seen a lot more around Seal Island. But I'm not sure. I haven't heard much because, again, a lot of researchers weren't able to go out to sea during this year. I haven't really heard much recently on that. But I do know that actually we saw a white shark. I think a white shark was spotted only 2 weeks ago, quite a small one, in False Bay. And they are seeing a few more bronze whalers, but I haven't really heard much on the seven gills recently. Yeah. Well,
hopefully they'll come back. I mean, it is something where as tourism returns, and I'm obviously I work in tourism, an advocate for tourism to encourage people to connect with wildlife and develop an interest. And hopefully, I mean, you're talking about these underprivileged kids, and if 1 in 100 of them grows up to be a conservationist, what a victory. And similarly, I think once people actually spend time with sharks in the water and can finally drown out that theme song going da-dum, da-dum, once they can do that and they can start being as fascinated with them as they are with a lion on land, from the safety of a safari vehicle, and they realize they are safe in there, they might start loving them and wanting to conserve them and learn more about them. And again, people come to Africa and they see a lion and they go, right, what else do you have? And then they get interested in leopards and cheetahs. Perhaps your equivalent of the cow sharks and the bronze whalers. I grew up being told to be afraid of the bronze whaler. Should I be afraid of the bronze whaler? Or I think the Americans call it a copper shark. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the same name for the species. So I don't know, the shark spotters report on presence of bronze whalers. I think they report on the presence of any shark in the bay at the moment. But yeah, I'm not sure of encounters with bronze whalers. I haven't really heard many encounters with bronze whalers.
So
I don't know about the population though.
If people are afraid of the water, should they be? What should they be afraid of in the water, if anything? Or should the water just be afraid of them?
Well, I mean, like, I don't know. It's such a tough one. Like if you're going into the marine environment in any form, if you're surfing, if you're swimming, if you're diving, if you're on a boat, you've got to be aware that you're going into their home. Just like if you were going on a safari drive, you are going into those animals' environment, and you've got to respect that. So, I mean, a lot of people love spending time in the ocean, so you've got to weigh up the risks. I mean, the risk of being attacked by a shark or having a shark encounter is very, very rare. If you think about the number of people that are actually in the ocean. And actually, the risk of sharks being attacked by humans is far greater. Like, I mean, this is one of the stats that we talk to our kids about, that I think the global average number of people that are killed by sharks around the world globally, is about between 4 and 6 people on an annual basis.
Right.
Whereas they think that the average number of sharks killed by humans annually on a global basis as well is around 100 million. So they've got a lot more to be scared of than us.
Yeah, and it's often, I mean, most people I think have heard of the shark finning to go into shark fin soup, but little more insidious perhaps is countries you'd think know better, Australia. Yeah, fish and chips. It's not, well, a shark is a fish, obviously, but it's shark and chips that they're eating a lot of the time, and it's not even from Australia. You know, this cheap. It's a lot of the times it's from South Africa, isn't it?
Yeah, that's part of the shark fisheries here in South Africa. A lot of it is exported to Australia, and they've found, I think they've done DNA analyses on those species on the fish and chips that they sell in Australia, and they found that those are actually South African species.
Which is insane. I mean, just without beating the conservation drum too hard, because people walk away from it, you're taking out a species that's already under threat. The carbon footprint of flying shark to Australia or shipping it there, either way, that great big diesel thing chugging its way across the oceans, that is absolutely bonkers. I mean, it is actually quite easy to ask where the fish is from. If it is dirt cheap and they won't tell you, and they don't claim not to know what it is, just don't buy it, would be my advice. Do you eat fish and chips, out of curiosity?
So I am a pescatarian, but I have been since I was 6. But not really for, I probably should stop eating fish, in short. Not just because of the threats to our oceans, but also in terms of pollutants, the mercury levels or the heavy metals in fish, and also the plastics now that are getting into fish, that is just crazy. So on a health basis and a ethical basis, it's not the best decision. So I do try to limit it, but I have been partial to odd fish and chips. I'm British.
There's some bloody good fish and chips in and around Cape Town. I know. Again, I'm edging towards vegetarianism at the moment, and it's that's going to be a hard one to get rid of. And yeah, now that I'm in England, they make it really, really nicely. But I've actually started asking, where's the fish from? And again, if they don't know, then I don't really want to eat it. But that's something else to bring up. Talking about the pollutants there, the UPROAR network that this is broadcast on has been running a little segment where they do recipes for things like credit cards. And the point to it is most people are now ingesting about a credit card's worth of plastic a month, which seems crazy, but the amount of microplastics we're putting into the oceans, and I've even seen footage of fish being caught, and as it's being cleaned, you can actually see the bits of plastic in its flesh that have migrated through its system. And then once you imagine that, well, that gets eaten by a bigger fish like a tuna, that gets eaten by a swordfish, the accumulation of all of that is obviously extraordinary. And off the once incredibly polluted waters of Japan was, I think, where we first started learning about this pyramid with mercury getting into the fish and affecting the learning ability of children.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And also, I don't know if you heard about it, we had this nurdle. Have you heard of nurdles before?
Nurdles?
So like a nerd. But
Okay. Is this the accent speaking, or is this? Do you have 2-minute nerdles? What is a nerdle?
Nerdle, Nurdle.
I've never heard that word.
So a nurdle is it's about, I think it's the actual size is 5 millimeters. It's a piece of raw virgin plastic, and basically every plastic product is melted down from nurdles. So they get shipped all around the world. Unfortunately, this is where the dangerous part comes in, and they are used in construction of anything plastic. So there was a big nurdle spill in South Africa, and there have been several nurdle spills all around the world.
I'm trying to keep a straight face. It's just, you're telling a terrible story.
I got something else.
Microplastic.
Plastic pellets. There was a big spill of plastic pellets of a ship. I think they think it was a Plettenberg Bay late last year. And these pellets, they're clear or opaque, and they just look like fish eggs, and they're washing up in their tons. I think it was something like 9,000. I'm going to get this wrong. 9,000 kilograms, which would be 9 tons, have been collected so far during COVID. So obviously not as many people on beaches, so there are not as many volunteers, but also the tech teams that were dealing with it weren't able to get out as much. So yeah, that's how much has been collected in the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months.
The nurdles, they float presumably, or do they?
And they also stick so they come up. So you often we find them all along the high tide line. So that's where we do most of our collections. But they also get right under the sand. But they also stick to kelp. But they're floating on the surface, so they look like fish eggs. And then animals are just eating those. So they're going to be in our, and they're, I mean, we go to the beach and we pick up 100 at a time, kind of thing. So it's a big issue. And it has been, I mean, I know there's been several studies done in the UK looking at nurdles, and I think there was one in Bristol that looked at a nurdle spill there. So yeah, it's a big worldwide issue at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, sometimes I know it's been used for good. There was again, it sounds quite comical, but a spill of a shipment of rubber ducks, the bath toy.
I heard about that.
Yeah, enormous research came from that in terms of ocean currents. And so, hopefully some small good can come from it. But I mean, I can immediately, the moment you said they look like a fish egg, it's like, oh, this is catastrophic. That's seabirds. It's the otters that we mentioned. You got a beautiful population of otters down there. All those fish, of course, as well. Presumably even some of the crustaceans might try to scavenge them.
Yeah, definitely other invertebrate species as well. Yeah. No, it's quite scary.
Yeah. All right. So we'll that the silly name nurdles and but a sad story. We do like to wind up with a positive each show. Give us some good news. Okay,
leading on from the nurdles, we've got to have some good news. Positives. So recently,
there's a terrible pattern here. When I ask people for good news, you always sit and look up this. It's when you finally get a profile, they'll go, "Bloody hell, toughest question so far."
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, in the conservation world, it is quite a tough question. But it's also how you've got to end every conversation like this, because otherwise, it's the doom and gloom again, and that nobody wants to be bombarded with that, unfortunately. Yeah. So, positive news in terms of the shark world. Did spot a white shark the other day, or I didn't personally, but the shark spotters did. So maybe they are coming back, and also maybe it's just ecosystem shifts. Maybe things are just moving around.
It might not be us. It might not be us. That's the good news.
I wish that was the case, but I'm not sure that will be the case. But other news, I think it was only a week ago that, so I mentioned that one of the biggest threats to sharks is fishing pressure. And so slowly some shark species are being recognized on CITES to prevent trade with those species. and also fishing of those species. And the Spain, which is the biggest fishing, it catches the most short fin mako, which is the fastest shark in the ocean. They catch the most short fin mako sharks, and they have just announced a moratorium on fishing for those species.
That's fantastic.
So slowly things are starting to happen. Yeah, international pressure and people listening to the facts, and to the science. So hopefully more and more of that can happen, and some more fishing pressure can be alleviated.
I don't know if you heard as well, but I actually had a guest on Deep in the Bush called Cade. He's 13 years old, and he was part of a group that lobbied the government of Florida, the Floridian Senate, to stop. There was an internal trade of shark fin there. It was allowed, and they got that banned for Florida, which was one of the bigger consumers or buyers. So again, I think there's the good ship conservation turns slowly, but once it gets ahead of steam, it moves with force. So it's great to hear that these things are happening. And
that's amazing.
Spain does not have a great conservation track record, so that's really, really great news to hear that. So there you are. You found some not just good news, but great news, and you taught me a word.
I'm not going to say it again.
On which note, thank you very, very much for joining us today. I hope whatever stage of lockdown comes next for you there, they do carry on allowing you to get all the brilliant wines from the Cape that I miss a lot. And hopefully we'll be able to come out and visit soon. And if people do come to Cape Town, once tourism does return in a meaningful way, I really suggest you go to the Shark Education Centre. Not only will you learn a lot there, the area it's in, Kalk Bay, that's Kalk, is fantastic for dining, for shops. It's got one of my favorite secondhand bookstores in the world there. Please tell me it hasn't shut down with COVID. Yeah, fantastic place to go and spend a day and get into the water as well. A safari doesn't just have to be on land. There's so many amazing opportunities there. But again, Clova, thank you very, very much. And good luck with all you're doing, that amazing, amazing work educating children. That's really what we need, is the next generation coming through, and just some of them taking up the conservation call. Thank you for
this platform.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.